Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Be 2 years ago. I get asked by my grandmother to trench and trim rose bushes at the event center she works at. Used to be a hospital back in a long time ago. I walked to the place since it was no more than 6 blocks from where I live. I was given keys to get into 3 separate gates. It is Sunday, so no one would be there doing other stuff. One for the front gate, then another for the event area, then the section where the utility area is. The utility area is still outside and has an AC unit, electrical, and water hose, where 2 buildings share 2 back doors for 2 rear entrances. I had the hose right up to the first gate where some odd 20 rose bushes were to water them, which took me about 2 hours. Once I finished, I grabbed the hose and started to make my way back to the utility area. I get there, then I roll up the hose on a huge roller. Then I hear laughter. At first, I was confused about the direction of it. It wasn't coming from where I was, so I kept turning my head to find out where it was coming from. I hit the point where I thought was coming from inside the building. This door was the one leading into the place where they kept the patients for surgeries and immediate health care. I am about 10 paces from the door, and I start to walk over. The door had many windows and had a white transparent curtain, so I wanted to look inside, knowing that there was no one there when I got here. I get close enough to the door that I can tell it was multiple children. I look inside, and right as I adjust my vision, I see a little girl standing 10 feet away from the door. Must have been 4 feet tall. She was a light-haired girl, and she was wearing a dress like you would see from Little House on the Prairie. She is blue in color. Everything about her was a teal mix, including her skin and hair was a light blue. She was smiling and staring right at me. I got terrified by the look she gave me and noped out of there. I ran across the yard and made my way through the outside area, then the rose path. Then I jumped over the fence, forgetting to lock all those gates back up. I get a good 30 feet away from the front of the building and looked back, and there was my grandmother nearly walking into the building where I saw the girl. I call out to her and she gets a confused look on her face. She walks over to me and I tell her my situation. She goes on to tell me that a medium came by last month from sheer curiosity to tell them about the place. Medium told my grandmother that a little girl that has passed likes to follow her. Everywhere she follows her side, everywhere she goes in the building. She isn't necessarily tormenting anyone. She just likes my grandmother. She just follows her. Never go back there again by myself. That was one of the times I had something strange happen to me by myself. My mother and my grandmother both had experiences from the place.
Not sure if it fits here, but this is the most inexplicable thing I've ever witnessed. June 2002, I'm at university in the United Kingdom. Exams over, parties until end of term. Get back to my room about 3 a.m. on a Sunday night, Monday morning. Turn off the lights, shutting down the pooter before bed. Lorry, that's a truck for those of you who speak US English, pulls up right on the street outside my window. Tiny, almost pedestrian street. Sunday night, heavy goods vehicle. This is noteworthy. 2 guys get out, open the back of the lorry, use the key to enter the Pastimes shop under my window using the key, deactivate the alarm with code. Pastimes is a chain that sells knockoffs of historical items, like a copy of a Viking chess set made of plastic. Quite expensive, only own brand goods. Remove the door, chuck it in the back of their vehicle, take out an identical door wrapped in bubble wrap, etc. Install new identical door, shut it, drive off. That's odd. 5 minutes go by. Transit van parked across the street all this time. Doors open on the transit van. 2 guys get out. Use a key to unlock the door that has been there all of 5 minutes. Disable the alarm with code, remove the door, and chuck it in their van. Remove identical door from their van, wrapped in bubble wrap, etc. Install it. Leave. They must have been hiding in their van all along. Watching as the first guys replaced the door, I went into the shop the next day and talked to the manager. She was adamant that she knew nothing about this, and that she had entered that morning with the normal key and normal alarm code. Noticed nothing unusual, nothing taken, seemed concerned. I lived in that town for another few years and nothing weird happened, theft, etc. with that shop. Indeed, anything stolen from past times would have 0 resale value, and they left no cash in there overnight. Plus, Everyone seemed to be able to unlock the door and disable the alarm when they wanted to, if they wanted to rob the place.
Be me, age 11 or so. I live in rural Ontario. A friend had a forest and a swamp behind his house. His dad carved out trails for the ATVs. Buddy and I were walking through the woods one day. Went off trail, ventured into brush taller than we were. He's ahead of me. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a head and shoulders, but completely black, like a shadow, rise over the brush and dip back down. Chalk it up to my imagination and say nothing. Emerge from the brush, onto a wide trail, maybe 10 feet wide. Take a few steps. Out of nowhere, about 6 feet ahead of us, sprints a shadow, from the brush on the left into the brush on the right. Picture someone hunched over, running, but like a shadow. Made no noise, brush undisturbed. Buddy freezes, looks at me. I look at him. We turned back and ran all the way up the hill to his house. His mom says it was probably a coyote. No chance in hell was that thing a coyote. Been afraid to walk in the woods alone ever since. Second experience. Be me, age 13 or so, still in rural Ontario. Cable didn't exist, so we had a TV antenna on the side of the house and the TV in the basement. Eating dinner upstairs with mom and sister. Hear voices from down below. Full-out conversation. 2 distinct voices. Can't make out what they're saying. We go quiet. My mom asks if we turned the TV off. My sister and I both told her we did. Mom asks us to go check. Too freaked out, so she goes herself. Returns upstairs a moment later. Confirms TV was off. Voices have stopped. Mom's best guess is that since cell phones were becoming more widespread, our TV antenna picked up somebody's phone call. Never actually figured out who or what was speaking.
This story of mine has always made me think if I really met whoever was playing basketball with me as a kid. There was no weirdness involved other than some paranormal stuff. Be me around 2001, 6 years old, at a family gathering out in the countryside. It was cloudy outside, drizzling. Bored.jpg. Go outside with a raincoat and a hat to keep me dry. Eventually stumble upon a basketball court down the road. There was a man in his 30s or 40s playing basketball all by himself. He also had a blue bicycle close by. Hollered at him and asked him if I could join in. He said, sure. He gave me the basketball and guided me along. We both had a lot of fun and shared a lot of laughs. 20 minutes passes and he has to go. Sad.jpg. He told me that maybe one day we will meet again and play more basketball. See him get up on his bicycle and go his way. Shouted, bye. He shouted, bye back. Go back home and find my older sister talking to my parents. Apparently she also went out and saw me. Apparently just as the man said he had to go. Parents asked me worryingly, what did you do out in the rain? I said, played basketball with a cool dude. My older sister told my parents I was out there all by myself, shocked.jpg. It still boggles my mind that it wasn't even real, that the man that I had so much fun playing basketball with didn't exist. It was one of the reasons why I started believing in the paranormal.
I have one. My dad told me this. I have based Grandpa. Sadly, he passed away. Before he died, he loved spending time at his cabin. Did some hunting and fishing up there. Spent the lonelier hours playing chess by himself. After Grandpa dies, Dad rummages through the cabin for anything that might be of sentimental or financial value. One thing he leaves behind is Grandpa's chess set. It's a cheap one anyway and not worth anything. Dad comes back a few times to check on the cabin. Finds the chess set open with pieces on it. It's like that each time he visits. Dad thinks it must be squatters or just some disrespectful campers/hikers breaking in and using the cabin without permission. Decides to spend a week there to scare off anybody who might be using the cabin on the sly. Puts away the chess set. Passes the night there. Next morning, the chess set is open again. Set up with the pieces as though someone were playing during the night. Dad thinks, not good figures. These must be some brazen intruders. Feels lucky they didn't attack him. He's confused, though, because he locked the front door. And the back door makes a ton of noise when opened. So he knows he would have heard that fast forward to that night. Dad doesn't sleep. Stays up all night by the front door with his gun in his lap. The entire night, his attention is focused out the front window. He isn't worried about the back because, again, he knows he'll hear anyone trying to come in through that door long before they actually get inside. All night, nothing happens. When morning comes, Dad is ready for some shut-eye. He gets out of his chair, turns around to head to his room. There on the table, in the same room he's been sitting all night, just behind his chair, is the chess set. It's open, with the pieces set up on top.
Be English. Live in a proper rural area. Friends and I see derelict buildings in the forest every time we drive down a certain road. Bored. Decide to check it out. Park at some nature reserve. After wandering around, find it and it's nothing special, but see a larger building in the forest further on. Building turns out to be huge, with no entrance or exit, and when we walk around it, we see that parts of it have bloodstains. Think it's pretty interesting. Decide to walk further on. Stop for a smoke. Mate whose mum's a psychic, she says he feels something just isn't right there. I think he's full of it, but then look at the floor in more detail. Tent is in tatters on the floor. Abandoned clothes and food, hairbrushes and things that make it look like campers have just abandoned all their stuff and ran. Aforementioned mate says something really doesn't feel right, suggesting we turn back. Agree at this point. We turn back, and as we walk, we realize the woods aren't the same. Feels darker, colder. Start seeing fabric on trees which has been pulled off. Actually hear whispering and cracking branches everywhere. Friend is scared at this point. Starts running forward in fear. The rest of us chase him. He starts screaming. We grab him and pull him to the ground, thinking he's gone mental. After he calms down, we pull him up and realize we were in a place we recognize, past the massive building, the one about twice the size of the trees, which was almost impossible to miss. Friend says we need to get out of there now. Nope all the way to the car and leave. Looking back to it, there could have been so many explanations, but genuinely my heart has never been beating so damn fast. The whole atmosphere just felt oppressive.
These incidents took place during my childhood years up until the day I graduated from high school in La Crosse, Wisconsin. We lived in an old 3-story brownstone apartment building with a basement apartment. The whole building was owned by the family. Initially, my grandmother's sister lived in the basement with her family and her 2 brothers occupied the 2nd floor. My family was on the 1st main floor and my grandmother was on the 3rd floor. She believed in the superstition that if you moved down a level if you lived in an apartment you would soon die. She continued to climb the 3 flights of stairs even though she was very arthritic. As the years passed by, her sister and her immediate family eventually moved out and the 2 brothers on the middle floor passed away. The basement level was now empty and my mother, father, sister, brother, and I continued to live on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor was empty and my grandmother still resided alone on the 3rd floor. There was never a thought of renting the vacant rooms. On several nights, while we were asleep, out of nowhere the front door would slam, waking everyone up. After a few seconds, there would be footsteps moving up the metal stairs followed by footsteps, shuffling and creaking above us on the 2nd floor. My father would jump up and rush to see who broke into the house. No one was ever there of course, and things would be quiet again for a few weeks and then it would happen all over again. The apartment was usually cold and drafty, so we would all stand next to a wood stove in the pantry because it was our heat source. On several occasions, we would see a faint apparition of someone walking towards the stove. Once in a while we would think someone had come home and would say, "Hello," only to be greeted by nothing. When I turned 10 years old, my mother was sleeping on the 3rd level to help care for my grandmother. My mother recalled one incident when she woke up and saw me standing beside her bed. She asked what I wanted, I turned, walked away, and disappeared. There was another incident where she rushed out of the bathroom on the 1st floor and was frantic because she heard her mom scream for her. My sister and I were shocked because we didn't hear anything. On another occasion, my grandmother's aunt had been sick and was in the hospital. We were driving home and my mother was resting her head against the window when suddenly she rose up and shouted, "Oh my God, Aunt Jane just died. I just saw her face." My father looked at the clock and it was about 7 p.m. When we got home, the charge nurse was calling to let us know that she had passed away at the exact time. The most memorable incident happened and my brother and I were talking about the weird stuff that had occurred in the house over the years. I said, "Yeah, like the old guy who used to watch us sleep." I was sort of half joking since I wasn't sure if he had ever known since it was never brought up between us. He turns and answers, "You mean the guy that stood behind the dresser in the living room, who leaned over with his hands behind his back. As he was talking, he duplicated the way the apparition moved exactly. That really freaked me out.
I am forever haunted by this experience. It was April 1977. Two other young guys and I were in a juvenile detention center in Vergennes, Vermont. It was way out in the country and we had made plans to escape that day. We asked for passes to walk across campus to the infirmary. Then when we got outside, we ran through the apple fields, up along the creek, and headed north. At one point, a bull chased us out onto a tree fallen in the water. We finally got away and continued running for what seemed like hours. It was a heart-pounding, drenched with sweat ordeal, going through brush fields and a slightly wooded area. We were very tired and running sloppy when all of a sudden, what sounded like a helicopter was overhead. We ran under a tree and a big shadow went over us. We looked up. A giant creature landed on a thick branch. We just saw its back at first. It looked like a person's back, but like a bodybuilder's, with rippling muscles and long legs. We were trying to figure out what it was. It was about 5 to 6 feet tall. When its head turned completely backward, these huge red-orangish round eyes that seemed to be glowing were staring right at us. They had a hypnotic effect. We were all frozen in fear as it looked at us like prey, and it seemed to be looking for the weakest one. All of a sudden, the branch broke from the weight of this big creature, but its claws were locked on, and those huge wings unfolded. The wind from those wings was very strong, and it carried the branch up over us and dropped it right in front of us. Then it turned its body while hovering above us. I yelled, grabbed a branch, waved it, and made lots of noise. It looked a little bewildered and very quietly turned away and glided off without hardly making a sound. I believe it thought we were injured prey and probably hunted other animals like that. I also believe it was trying to scatter us by dropping the tree limb nearby. It was huge. My native people's owl legend calls them big hoots. They had horns like horned owls. It was brown with a grayish speckled underbelly, huge claws that could grab a person, and an enormous beak. I think this is what people call the Mothman. One of the guys hung himself a few months later. He was really freaked out after the encounter and turned himself into the authorities. His name was Jim. I believe if we were not hiding from the helicopter we thought was overhead, it would have snatched Jim. He was the weakest and lagging behind. It did seem to be concentrating on him when it was staring us down with those big orange-red glowing eyes. I've been telling this story for over 40 years. Most people think I am crazy when I talk about an owl with a 10-foot wingspan.
When I was a kid, maybe 3 or 4, I apparently started crying and said "man," while pointing to one of the rooms in the basement where I was playing. I kept saying "man" and crying. My older brother came down, saw me crying, grabbed a gun and searched through all the rooms in the garage, but there was no one. He also took me upstairs and watched the security camera footage for the last half hour, but there was nothing. I shiver every time I think about it. Strange thing is, though, that when I was about 5, I woke up early in the morning at about 7. Everyone was out, but my mom was sleeping, and I saw a man dressed in a black suit with a briefcase with some sort of handheld machine going through the garden and putting this machine over the soil. I'm not sure what it was, but my best guess is a metal detector. As for what? I don't know. I looked through the window, and I kid you not, if you've ever played the Hitman games, this guy looked exactly like Agent 47. He looked up, and when he saw me, he ran away. Such a serious look and stare, the way he was dressed and what he was holding. It just scared me so much I ran to my mother and woke me up, but when she came to the window, he was gone. Also, when I was a kid, like 3, although I don't remember it, my mom said that a man wearing a black suit, black gloves, with a briefcase and a shaved head, came to the backyard when my older brother and older cousin were playing hockey. They were both about 17 and 18 at the time and athletic, so they chased him, but he ran to a black Jeep where someone was waiting. I don't know what was going on, but there was something wrong about everything.
Me and my friend driving around random areas we've never been much for shits and giggles, do cruises like this from time to time, trying to find a certain suburb because I'd never been there and hear about it frequently. Friend drives too far, end up going further and further until we're surrounded by paddocks and trees, with occasional cars driving past, but mostly cargo trucks. Take the next right thinking it was the one before, but it was a road too late. However, it was named after the road beforehand, just replacing the RD with set. As soon as we enter the road, we both say, This road is really weird, man. It just looks eerie and isolated, and like a stereotypical horror movie scene. No streetlights, just trees and darkness. Notice this woman walking on the road in the distance. Friend slows down. As we get closer, we realize she's walking really weirdly. It's hard to describe. Her legs looked limp and stiff at the same time, and moved forwards but slightly sideways at the same time. And as we came closer, we noticed she's moving more towards the car. Friend switches lanes. As we get closer, we see her face, which is pale, absolutely pale and vacant, with an empty-looking smile on her face. We both start freaking out, with this simultaneous sensation of dread in the pit of our stomachs. End of the road is a meter away, literally a dead end, nowhere she could have come from. Turn around to drive back, get closer and closer to the main road. She's nowhere to be seen, absolutely nowhere. Both nope. Avi it out of there and come back home.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.